When we play, God plays along with us. When we create, when we play with symbols, God plays along. God doesn't shirk away from all the iconography. God is the ultimate iconographer, the ultimate symbolist. One of the things I've been trying to spit out for this last few days is that Akhenaten and Akhenatenism no more worship, it was not a solar deity. They no more worshipped the sun, which was for a time used as a symbol. They no more worship the sun than Christians worship a hunk of wood, the cross. Right? Christians don't worship a hunk of wood. The entire story of what Akhenaten did, of the House of Amosha. It was a progressive campaign to, in a brief period of time, change thousands of years of tradition. Not that there wasn't value there. The old panoply, the old theater of gods couldn't be erased. The philosophy surrounding them couldn't be erased. But what it was is to try to slice through all the fat and get back to the basics. But we also have to remember that people will only be governed as much as they acquiesce to. As much as the people collectively agree to be governed, that's how much people will be governed. And as it so happens, we typically respect power, so we're usually governed, I wouldn't say easily, but, disproportionately. Which is, partially a good thing. Definitely. Largely a good thing. That we come to some kind of order. And not just tear each other apart like the rest of the animal kingdom. As time went on with Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Atenism, they were progressively chopping away symbols and chopping away the fanfare, doing away with appearances. The sculpture of Nefertiti when she was an older woman, she's adorned with almost nothing. She's like completely naked. She has one pharaonic helmet. Very humanist. Very unidealized. But still, beautiful woman. And what I consider the gem, the Mona Lisa of ancient Egypt, the sculpture, the bust of Mary Totten, supposedly Akhenaten and, I believe, Nefertiti's daughter. who's adorned with nothing. Nothing. It's a one of a kind. It's a one of a kind sculpture. And that's saying something. So we're familiar with the sun disk and Akhenaten and Nefertiti sitting at the throne, at their, thrones facing each other, kissing the baby. So there's already all the talk of what a revolution that was. An important thing, because I talked about the pragmaticism. Like, pragmatically, it's good to focus on the sun. Because that, on Earth, essentially sets everything in order. It determines when we work, how we work, what we work for. Especially in a heavily agricultural society. But that disk, that sphere, emitting all those rays, a lot of it has to do with geometry. And we can't ever forget how important to the noble classes, arithmetic or math and geometry were. And of course the Coptics separated the circle, or rather, had the base 60 counting system. Supposedly in Egypt it was like 36 hours in a day. They made the 360. They had 10-degree separations of the circle, which should be alarming because it means that they were able to geometrically create 10-degree sections of a circle, and that's problematic to this day. That stands in direct opposition to some of today's math, even though we still use the 360-degree circle, which is problematic, because a degree, or 10 degrees, or 20 degrees is problematic, rationally speaking. But anyway, that circle and that array of lines likely speaks to some of the geometry of Apollonius and Ptolemy, maybe Pappus. The papacy. Pappus. Pappus the old geometer. The papacy. But also at the end of those rays of the sun are hands. And if we step back, there's all these hands, all these rays of the sun are hands. Where do hands come from? Where do that many hands come from? Where do that many hands come from? This is just one way of looking at it, but it's a very important way to look at it. Where do all those hands come from? People. How does God serve the king? How does God serve the people? With people. That one sun, that one God shines through all of us. We are the rays of that central sun. We are the rays of that central soul. That individual with an ego, with a personality, so to speak. not simply being itself, but in a sense, personalized. Not necessarily anthropomorphized, but that's not a horrible way to go about it. But certainly individualized, singular, soul. Soul, S-O-U-L, soul, S-O-L. Soul, S-O-L-E? Soul, the sole of the foot, the foundation. Soul, the sole proprietor of heaven. But that central soul, God, shines, and we are the rays. We do the work. And it's said that it shows the people bowing down to Akhenaten in that picture, but those aren't the people. The people are working. The hands coming out from the center of the sun are the people, are the slaves, are the servants. The hands are depicted smaller, means they have a little less importance in society, even though Akhenaten, that was part of the stepping down process where things didn't have to be bigger or smaller to be more important. So some of the scale was evened out. But the people who are bowing to Akhenaten are like the priest class that Akhenaten is trying to replace, and like the administrators and bureaucrats and just the extended, bloated bureaucracy of nobility. They're the ones bowing down to the king who's being served by the people as rays of the central soul, who he also in turn protects and works for, and Nefertiti. And as his kingship moves forward, his depictions become increasingly feminized, whereas in a very early sculpture of Akhenaten, it doesn't look like anything like the famous ones. There's this famous sculpture, I believe, of him and Nefertiti, and there, if I hadn't read that that's who it was, I would have never ever guessed. The physical depictions are quite different, but still of simple dress with some adornment. And Akhenaten just looks maybe just a little pudgy, not quite as feminized and masculinized as in his later depictions. Or thinking of that one sculpture in particular, where the top is so incredibly masculine and the bottom is so incredibly, ridiculously, cartoonishly feminine. But he's blending the male and female gods progressively. Progressively over time, the depictions become more feminized and more of a blend in preparation for his disappearance, when Nefertiti would be, I guess you could say she's become the most famous, for good reason. But even that depiction, because the earlier depictions of Aten even had, I believe, hawks and other of the old hieroglyphs, and then they went to the more famous types of pictures that we're familiar with. But as time went on, Akhenaten tried to even get people to stop using those newer sun disk hieroglyphs and tried to get people just to use the hieroglyph or the cartouche symbol for Aten, which was a feather and then kind of a semicircle over I believe like a six-pointed wave, saw wave, six-pointed saw wave, over a circle with a circle inside it, a donut, which is what this picture is. But anyway, just looking at that symbol, like if you're into math or symbology at all, it is just, but I mean, especially math, it looks like a fraction. And you got pi as a, hemisphere. It also looks in the depictions I've seen, and it will require further study, but it looks like a tilted, I said hemisphere, but it's like half a circle, It's like half a disc, but it looks like it's slanted, so it looks like maybe half an oval, which is interesting mathematically. And then you have a wave, a saw wave, but you have a wave. It's kind of like the fraction bar, and then you have a circle with a circle inside it beneath it. But if you're into like geometry, and especially where there's a wave there, so then you're also talking about rotations, revolutions. Epicycles, for that matter. Just looking at that symbol naturally draws out a shitload of math. Like you could crunch out a lot of math just breaking down those symbols in simple geometry. It's a very sophisticated symbol. It may well be part of the reason, or I would say it almost certainly is part of the reason, like the power of that symbol. Not the sun stuff, not the power of that symbol. Is so powerful. It almost has more power than all of that other shit, all of the other artifacts combined. It is steeped. But anyway, Akhenaten was trying to get people to stop using the sun hieroglyphs and all this, and just start using the cartouche. I hope I'm using that word right. Because he was trying to get people away from idolatry. And he was trying to get people closer to, dare I say, the real God. Same thing with Moses, which is also kind of retold a little bit bad, in my opinion, in the Bible, because I guess you could say the priest class of the early Israelites did the same thing to Moses that the Egyptians did to Akhenaten. They're the same person. It was this major revolution, and it involved slaves, Canaanites, Israelites, Egyptians, all under one big banner. The legend went on to become Adonis in Greece by the time of Ovid, when he wrote Metamorphoses, 1,000+ years later. In the Egyptian tradition, they tried to erase him. Akhenaten, Aten, Adonis, Akhenadonis. Then also in Greece, Isis was worshipped quite a bit, and referring back to one of my recent posts, talking about how Isit or Isis, which I guess would have been Akhenaten's sister maybe. It's hard to say the way the families were so inbred, and the family trees were, quite the braid. But yeah, perhaps the mother that Adonis tricked into falling in love, or however, sleeping with, or whatever, her own father, could well have been the queen consort to Amenhotep III, Akhenaten's father. But then you look at all these other names in the Bible too. Moses' father's name was Amram. Am, Amen. Ram, Ra, Am. Am, with an R in the middle. I am that I am. I am Amram. Moses' father, Amram. Zipporah, I really want to tear into that, but it's too complicated for me right now. I have some more digging to do, but I believe it's related to the whole deal with like Kippur and Kippura and Keperura, Kepera. Same with Zipporah. An Ethiopian, which would explain the look of Mary Totten. But yeah, and Moses' sister, Miriam. Now, we know that Moses' daughter, or Akhenaten's daughter, is Mary Totten, beloved of the Aten. Mary Totten, beloved of the Aten. Now, Tutankhamun, who came a little bit later, had originally been Tutankhaten. Tutankhamun had been Tutankhaten, but he changed the Aten to Amen afterwards because of everything that was happening, because everybody was trying to tear down Atenism. And the bureaucrats got to Tutankhamun because he was such a little boy. Before they probably killed him. Maybe not. Somebody. Not necessarily Pharaoh or I. But, yeah, most certainly not. But we could well have assumed, had we known more about Mary Totten, had she lived, I think she did. I think she got away. But anyway, had she stuck around, her name may well have been changed to Mary Amen. And Mary Totten, Mary Amen, would easily have been phonetically shortened to Miriam, which means Mary, beloved. And they say that Mary comes from some unknown primitive root. When Moses fled Egypt, his sister Miriam had 400 years of Egypt under her belt. And you're telling me the Mary in her name doesn't mean beloved, just like it means in Mary Hotep and Mary Amen and on and on and on and on and on throughout Egyptian history, especially in that time period. Are you kidding me? And that's why at Mother Church, at St. Peter's, but the whole church, some immaterial thing, the collection, all of it, all the people, all the history, all the people, all the souls. That's the mother. What holds that all together, the immaterial thing, that's mom, that's Mary, the beloved. Merry Christmas. What's Merry and Merry Christmas mean? Happy, beloved. Mary's Christmas. And that's why there's that big old monument to Aten, to Moses, to Nefertiti, to Mary Totten, because of what they were doing then. It was part of the same mission. It's part of the reason why Christianity spread through the Greeks and through Egypt, because he was the fulfillment of many, many, many prophecies, not just from the Old Testament. Born as a resurrected Pharaoh, among other things, but that too